Good afternoon. Good afternoon on a beautiful Thursday evening. Preston Jackson with your Blitz package, Big County Preps. We're going to bring in Doug Pugh in a minute. But before we do, let's get ready for round 2 of the playoffs. Round 1 with plenty of excitement. We saw the number 1 and number 2 seeds across the state pretty much hold steady. And then a lot of parity in the middle of the brackets with the 4 and 5 seeds exchanging blows. So we got a lot of excitement heading into week 2. Let's start with the good news versus the bad news. A little segment that we're going to hit up to prep for the Friday night games. Let's start with IRC versus Cambridge Christian. The good news for Cambridge Christian, they score 46 points per game. The bad news for Cambridge Christian is that they've allowed 40 points or more 3 times this year. IRC can score points. Small school football, there's not the best of defense played in our area. Whoever gets the ball last probably wins this football game. CCC versus Calvary. Of their common opponents, Calvary has defeated the same teams as CCC. St. Petersburg Catholic, Cardinal Mooney, and Admiral Farragut. The bad news, though, is that CCC outscored Calvary when playing those same opponents and held them to fewer points, including the October 13th game where CCC beat Calvary the first time 23-14. Hillsborough versus Arnwood. The good news for Hillsborough, they can physically compete with Arnwood. If you saw the game, Arnwood kind of ran away with that one in a matter of 2 possessions heading into halftime and in the third quarter, which kind of took the air out of the balloon for the Terriers and propelled Arnwood to the win. The bad news for Hillsborough is that no time in the playoffs has Hillsborough ever beaten Arnwood. Hillsborough and Arnwood have traditionally played twice a year for a long time. And every time, the second time around in the playoffs, Arnwood always gets the better of the Terriers. Braden River versus Venice. The good news for Braden River, they can score points. They can score a bunch of points. The first game this season versus Venice, the score is 41-35. Last year, 2016, there was a 42-35 win for Venice. So the good news for Braden River, they can score points. The bad news for Braden River, they have not beaten Venice. Here we go. Road Warriors segment. Let's start in 7A. Number 3, Plant. At number 2, Vieira. Just saying. The last 5 games for Vieira, they've outscored their opponent 268-34. Just saying. Let's go to Wiregrass Ranch at Lakeland. The first time around, Lakeland beat Winter Haven this season. The score is 55-7. That was on the 13th of October. Less than a month, round 1 of the playoffs, Winter Haven went toe-to-toe with Lakeland, losing in the final minute 17-13. Just saying. We're going to go to Largo. Number 3, Largo on the road at Naples. Naples scored 71 points to start the season versus one opponent. The second to last game of the season, they also scored 70 points to end the season. Just saying. Frostproof heading down to Pahokee. If you know anything down that way, you know it's tough to win there. Pahokee does not lose at home. They've got 2 losses this season. Both those losses on the road. Just saying. So Frostproof at Pahokee, Largo at Naples, Wiregrass Ranch at Lakeland, Plant travels to Vieira. We bring in Doug Pugh now. Doug, talk to me about the Road Warriors.
How we doing, Preston?
Doing well.
These Road Warriors, I'll tell you what, they're going to earn their money. They're going to earn every bit of road that they consume on their way to their game sites if they come away with victories. I'll tell you, starting with Largo at Naples, the way that Naples game ended against a 7-seeded Port Charlotte team was nothing short of crazy nor amazing in the sense that Naples was losing 7-0 with 20 seconds to go. They somehow score a touchdown and then they miss the 2-point. They get the onside. They get down. They get a touchdown that was really not really a touchdown. They kick the extra point. They win 13-7. Magical things, depending on which side you're on, happen at Naples when things are close at that stadium. Largo played a really, really good ball game against Barron Collier. That Barron Collier team, that record did not indicate how well that team was coached and how good that team was from an athletic standpoint. So Largo does have a realistic chance of doing some damage to Naples, but they cannot turn the ball over under any circumstances. They're going to have to play keep away, and they're going to have to put some points on the board. I don't think holding. I don't think they can expect just to get 10 points and hold Naples out the rest of the way. Plant at Vieira is a tricky one. Plant could, kind of get some of their magic going that they've been known to get in the postseason. This Vieira team, the vast majority of their big boys on their schedule came on the front end of that schedule. In fact, they didn't, Palm Bay, records-wise, was the best team they played in those 5 games you mentioned. But I would say records-wise, because Palm Bay really isn't what they were in Class 5A as they've been in recent years. And they didn't have Osceola, Simi Osceola, or Merritt Island that they played this year. So, but quality wins against Rockledge, Gonzaga, a close 10-7 loss to Cocoa. That team is a much different team at home, and that's a long bus ride for Plant. So that's a very intriguing game to me. Wiregrass, we said that what was most important for Wiregrass last week was what, and that was to hold on to the football, and that was to grind it out, not get into some sort of back and forth and try to put up, Texas Tech or Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State type of score up, and that's exactly what they did. And they came away 17-10 victors. I expect them to go about their business the same way against Lakeland. I think that game is a little bit closer than some people think, although the score may not indicate that at the end. But at this point, I'm not really going to make a prediction on that game other than I think that game goes a little bit different than how some people think. And last but not least, Frostproof at Pahokee. Frostproof went into a pretty tight environment to go into, which is kind of saying something for the fact that Wildwood was 0-10 last year. McKinley Roll comes in and turns them around. They're 9-0 this year. They didn't even have a football team 2 years ago. So I would say that, that's a quality win, going in and putting 59 on an undefeated football team. You put up that kind of performance against Pahokee, you just might pull off one of the biggest upsets in the state of Florida for the round 2.
Well, we got some good teams, and we have some well-traveled teams. I'll say this about Wiregrass Ranch. They will not be surprised about the environment at Bryant Stadium at Lakeland because they traveled there last year. They traveled there last year. They know what to expect over in Lakeland, which is an awesome football environment. Plant always travels well, even when they go to Alabama. They've been to Louisiana. So Coach Robert Wiener will have they played in Georgia also. Coach Robert Wiener will have his guys ready on the road. But Vieira is a tricky one as they have played great defense and they also have played some high-powered offense. Pahokee is a whole different beast, man. That's like the trap, man. You get down there in Pahokee in that area, and for a team like Frostproof, who has their own great football environment, that's going to be a huge challenge for those guys. So just 3 out of those 4 which we mentioned, I really am excited to see how those teams fare on the road. Doug, there's a lot of excitement in Pasco County right now. All right, Wiregrass at Lakeland, they're in round 2. Zephyr Hills is in round 2 with Clay coming to town. Mitchell, undefeated right now. They're going to host Vanguard. So Pasco County football trying to put their stake in the turf in the county. And I think one game of interest, and I'm going to tell you why that has huge interest, which fans are on both sides of the fence, is this Vanguard at Mitchell game. Let me just tell you the sense I'm getting right now, Doug, and then I'll hand it over to you and let you run with it. I'm getting the feel that Mitchell is now turning over the leaf that becomes a team who is good in the area, not just Pasco County. I say this because fans, especially in our area, had reservations about Mitchell. The last few seasons, they've been climbing the charts. They hadn't beat anybody good outside the county. So that challenge was on the table. This year they come in. They have a quality win against Clearwater, and Clearwater's been really good under Don Misick the last few years. Berkeley Prep comes in town. We know about Berkeley's history and their tradition. They beat Berkeley Prep. Then they end up, I'm missing one team, Doug. There's another out-of-county team that they play. They end up beating Tarpon. Tarpon's had their up and down years, but athletically, Tarpon has kids that could compete with any team in Pinellas County. They beat Tarpon. Then you go into round one, all right, where they got to beat a quality Hillsborough County team, a quality team, a playoff caliber team. And despite the discrepancies in how that game went, Mitchell ends up victorious over Chamberlain, who had went toe-to-toe with Hillsborough and went toe-to-toe with Arnwood. There are only 2 losses of the season. So right now, I kind of get the sense that Mitchell is that team, and if for a team to be successful, you got to have some haters. I think Mitchell is starting to garnish more haters because of their success. And with that said, they've done nothing but what fans, at least us on this side of Big County Preps, want them to do. We want them to win, number one, and then we want them to start beating quality opponents, which they have. Add in the good wins they've had in Pasco County this year, and then you add in the quality wins of out-of-county teams. At this point in the season, I think Mitchell has earned the respect to be mentioned as at least a quality football team in our 6-county area. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, if you set the bar at a quality football team, you're absolutely correct.
All right, now hold on. Fine, I'll take you on that. However, I still am, let's say a quality football team. They haven't been to where Plant's been. They haven't been to where Arnwood's been. There's a lot of teams that haven't been where Plant and Arnwood have been.
That's
so
correct.
if we go Plant, Arnwood, Lakeland, Braden River, and then we can add in one more if we would like to, there's a lot of teams that fall into that quality program because they know there's not that many who are above that standard that are in the same conversation with Arnwood, Plant, Braden River, maybe Jesuit the last few years. There aren't many teams who fit into that same category.
I think that what you can say, and we're using this as a 1-year sample size.
Yes.
We're not going to talk about the legacies or the histories of the schools involved here because that would not be fair to Mitchell. Mitchell's barely even, they're not even 2 decades old as a school. So I would say this: Mitchell is playing this season at an elite level because this is what you require from your elite teams. No matter how bad your competition is, thump them and thump them real good. That's exactly what Mitchell did this season. You can't use the excuse that Pasco County, that they have this Pasco County schedule. You can only use it for so long, is what I'm trying to say with Mitchell. I think that they, as a 1 year in the year 2017, that this program has put themselves in the elite category of teams for this year, and I think that's what you'll take at this point. You've got Wiregrass in the second round. You've got Zephyr Hills that we're going to talk about in a minute, and we're getting to a point now where we need to see. If you're in Pasco County, you have to see on a year-in, year-out basis. You have to see Mitchell and Wiregrass play each other, which we may get sooner rather than later because, with the adjustments in the FTP reports, I believe Wiregrass will actually fall into the 6A threshold and probably get into that district, which could add some more intrigue because you've got Sun Lake who will eventually rebound and things of teams like Springstead and Lana Lakes and not to mention Gulf and 5A are actually probably going to be 6A schools. And that'll actually weigh their schedule down a little bit. But I'm looking ahead at what is set up for Mitchell at the here and now. The way Mitchell won that ball game, what they did, what a good team and what an elite team does at this time of year. And forgive me for saying this, Mitchell fans, but you won in spite of yourselves. In many regards, you got 5 of 14 and 2 interceptions from your starting quarterback. You had a questionable touchdown called for you, but in the meantime, you did everything to deserve to win the ball game. If that makes sense, Preston, because when the time came, you got 201 yards from your feature running back, and you got some key stops and forced forced field goals when Chamberlain was driving. And that's what good teams do. The defense never broke. And so, that gives you hope coming into this game with Vanguard. Now, Vanguard, they have Nkosi Perry that goes that goes down to Miami. His name is being thrown around as coming into to be a possible starter for Miami. That's how highly they thought of him. All he does is pass for 2,300 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. He's 1 touchdown away from tying Perry's single-season record, and he was taken out of the game by the fourth quarter in 6 games for Vanguard this year. He's got the combination with Leonard Manuel, who we've seen on the basketball court. The 6'5", 200-pound sophomore just committed to Miami. That Mitchell has no choice but to neutralize, and so this is a much better game. If we were to use Pinkos as the 17, even though that's 17 spots ahead in the rankings, that's not 17 points or anything like that. But if we were to have fun and convert that to a spread, I would take Mitchell plus 17 all day, every day, and twice on Sunday.
Let me play this game with you. All right, Doug. So you know me, I am a process guy. Okay. You go through it, you do what you need to do, and there are levels to success. Okay. Let's place Mitchell in Hillsborough County. All right. And Hillsborough County football fans, we're guys over here. It's Hillsborough football and nothing else. You know how we can get sometimes.
Right.
But let's take since 2014, all right, when Coach Andy Smith took over the program, Mitchell goes 6-5. 2015 they go 9-2. 2016 they go 8-3, and currently in 2017 they're sitting 11-0 and undefeated. Now let's make this comparison to Tampa Bay Tech. When Tampa Bay Tech went from being a doormat in Hillsborough County to when Coach Culpepper took over the program in 2007, going 6-5, 10-2, 9-2. And then when Coach Roberts took over the program, 9-3, they dipped a little bit, then became successful again, going 7-6, 7-5, 9-2, and Tampa Bay Tech right now with only 1 loss on the season to Armwood. All right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this: when we ask a program to reach a certain level, they're going to have to A, win the games on their schedule, and B, beat quality teams. Okay. Outside of Armwood and Plant, maybe Jesuit last year, you would have to beat a team like Tampa Bay Tech, maybe a team like Hillsborough, maybe a team like I guess I'll throw Jesuit back in there. Like, all right, if you're like a Lake Gibson, if you're in Polk County, you'd have to beat those type of teams to say, okay, now we're trying to step into the next level. So Tampa Bay Tech, in my opinion, is on that second level, trying to be in the Armwood Plant conversation, but they got to beat an Armwood and Plant. So in comparison, I think Mitchell now is on that level 2, trying to scrape that level 2 because they need to beat a quality Vanguard team to say, hey, okay, now there is no more debate about whether or not we're a gimmick team or a gimmick school, because their past records have shown they are a part of the process, and they're going through the levels process. They passed level 1 now, and now they're fighting their way through level 2. As Tampa Bay Tech is on the tail end of level 2, trying to fight into level 3. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I would say that it's going to be unfair if Vanguard goes out and smacks Mitchell. I think it's still going to be unfair to Mitchell. I don't think I think Mitchell's earned the right to say they don't slide backwards even if they lose this week. In terms of where they're at overall as a program, Preston, I think Mitchell has firmly planted themselves in a spot like Tampa Bay Tech. I think Wiregrass is. I think you can make the case that Wiregrass, because I say that to say this, because I look at what Wiregrass and Mitchell has coming up. There's a lot of talent coming up for both of those teams. It's going to be enough talent to adequately run their sides of the county. So now you can almost, in a sense, if you can expect your team, if it's a reasonable expectation for your team to go 8-2, 9-1, or 7-3 at the worst, But the expectation is, look, we're going to the postseason. This entire regular season, kind of like the way Plant thinks, this regular season is a tune-up for the postseason. Or Armwood thinks that same way.
Right. Those are champions. That's a championship style mindset.
That's a championship style mindset. Once you get teams that are now focused on every week must be a spiral curriculum building towards the postseason, and with the end game being not a novelty, the end game being minimum regional finals. That's when you cross the threshold. Tampa Bay Tech has gotten there closer. Out of those two, Lake Gibson got to the finals last year, but Lake Gibson's numbers aren't really as, shall we say, as consistent as Tampa Bay Tech has been. TBT is one of the more consistent teams that we don't recognize for their consistency. If that's one of the points that I would like to make. So I think that in terms of Mitchell is good enough to hang with Vanguard. They're good enough to beat Vanguard, but they have to play the polar opposite of the way they did against Chamberlain, which I can see them doing, but it's going to take a perfect game.
So, final point is, I believe that we, at least with Big County Preps, I want to talk about Mitchell. I want to talk about Mitchell past Pasco County. Okay.
Correct.
In order for Mitchell to scrape out of just the Pasco County conversation, they need to not just compete with Vanguard. A win is what needs to happen for a few reasons: to be recognized as an elite program, and also to become a state contender. And that is kind of the same, and we made the Tampa Bay Tech conversation, and folks who have a championship mindset would understand the same thing. If you're Tampa Bay Tech and you're mentioned past Hillsborough County because Tech has earned that right to be mentioned past Hillsborough County, now you want to be mentioned as a state power. And in order to be mentioned as a state power, you got to beat Armwood, and then you got to go win a state championship. So as Tampa Bay Tech is a level ahead of Mitchell right now, I think both of those programs can make a huge step forward with wins this next round. Let's keep moving on. Statewide talk, man. We can get out of our area, Doug. We got a lot going on from the top to the bottom. Give me let's hit maybe 2 or 3 games of interest that folks should pay attention to.
Well, you've got our regions that can solely contain our teams that I think everybody's going to be paying attention to. But if you're Zephyr Hills, where you're the only team from this area left in the region, you've got 3 teams from one district: Baker County, Menendez, and Clay. So you're going to have to probably going to be wanting to pay attention to the Baker County Menendez game if you're a West or an East Pasto fan. That bracket, that region north of them, West Florida versus Wakulla and Gabi versus Jacksonville Trinity Christian. I mean, that's heavyweights. You got a very interesting setup opposite of the Armwood, Hillsborough, Mitchell, Vanguard region, and that's 6A1 with St. Augustine, Navarre, Crestview, and Escambia. Those teams, Armwood is going to be, as long as Armwood continues to win, they're home. So the rest of it gets a little dicey when you have to go to games in terms you have to get onto their playoff points, their total points. And I'm busy putting together what the regions would have looked like had we not had district champions, because I think it's very interesting. Some of these matchups would have been just as good, but much different. You've got Northwestern, Miami Central, Mainland, and Carroll City, region 6A4. That's a fantastic pair of region games that you're getting ready to see. I hope we get the Rains versus Denellen region, state semifinal that I've been hoping for in 4A North. We're one step closer to that. Denellen is on the road at Bradford up in Stark, and Rains is hosting West Nassau. But I hope we get that. I actually hope we get Denellen Cocoa and not Rains Cocoa, but either one of those I'll be very happy with on the 4A level. And Madison County 11-0, versus Dixie County, 11-0 for Class 1A. There'll probably be more people at that one game than there will be in those two cities combined in terms of population. It's going to be something to behold up in Boot Hill, up in the Big Bend area. That is a fantastic game that I will be certainly watching. And then 8A North, to me, is just heavyweight after heavyweight after heavyweight. You got 8A1, Winter Park hosting Apopka, Wekiva hosting Boone, and then down in 8A2, you got Kissimmee Osceola versus Dr. Phillips, which is, if you've been paying attention, those two teams are pretty much penciled into Orlando every year for the last 4 or 5 years. Those two have been representing either 7A or 8A in the state finals. And then you got Vero Beach, a 10-0 Vero Beach hosting a Sarasota Riverview game, team that is 10-1. And do not be surprised if the Riverview Rams pull off that upset down there. That is a team that has now scored 60 points 3 straight times in their first round games the last 3 years.
Right.
That's nothing to shake. That's nothing to kind of thumb your nose at. I think that 8A, the big boys reside in 8A, and they're playing big boy football down there. I think 7A4 with Aquinas, that one, we're just kind of, they did what they had to do, and I think that we're kind of just waiting to see who we get from our 7A3 region, whether it's Venice, Braden River, or Tampa Bay Tech, or maybe a Palmetto team if they could sneak in there somehow. But I think that there's a lot that's going to happen. We had all those upsets down south last week. I think that we could be in for a couple of real shockers. I won't say which ones I think, but I think we definitely are in for a couple of shockers. I'm staring right at them at this computer as we speak, but I will not tell you which ones I think.
All right.
I'll text you and let you know as they're happening in real time. So
that works.
Good forewarned.
That works. All right. Last but not least, off topic from the playoffs, but not off topic for football or high school athletics, period. So you and I, Doug, were talking, and we've been able to travel around the state and see some really prevalent areas that really love their high school football. And we always hear the excuse here in Hillsborough County, for one, they're just high school athletics at times is not a priority. And you can tell because outside of 1 or 2 stadiums on a Friday night, the stadiums are empty. They're just dead. There's not anybody there. The home side is a stretch. The visitor side, it may be one umbrella over there. It just does not look good. So we were talking, hey, what happens if you erect a centralized stadium in Hillsborough County that can serve as a premier event location for a handful of football games each year? You can host state championship games, and we're talking like 10 to 15,000 seat stadium. It doesn't overwhelm the game. It could end up filling up, depend on the schools that participate there in the sport. Then it also serves as a club soccer spot. You can have state championships for all field events that can be bidded for to have there. And then you had some ideas. Man, talk to me. And the reason, Doug, that we kind of liked it is because it brings the aura of being invited to a certain location. And having that centralized stadium could entice casual fans to come, especially if it is easy to get to and navigate to, depending on where you're coming from. You had a few other reasons that you kind of liked the idea, and you've seen some stadiums in some areas that work that way. Give us your thoughts, man.
Well, I grew up playing in 2 of those types of stadiums. One was on the west side of Volusia County, and that was Spec Martin. And at one point, not too long ago, DeLand, Pine Ridge, University High School from Orange City, and Deltona were all having to use that stadium in a round-robin scheduling. And then growing up, Spruce Creek, Seabreeze, Mainland, and Father Lopez all shared Memorial Stadium. And then Bethune-Cookman would play in the afternoons on Saturday afternoons, and then you'd have another game on Saturday night. And it just seems like, even though those schools, all but Mainland and Seabreeze do not have their own stadiums on campus, they still use Memorial Stadium. And so You have Bethune-Cookman using that as well. DeLand and Stetson use Spec Martin, but really one of the main issues that kind of made me think that there needs to be something of that type of structure built is we live in a state where the weather is kind of the story, right? And you know what you're signing up for down here. So when we come into our football season and it's smack dab congruent with hurricane season, you're going to set yourself up, especially now where we put the premium on being able to have games. You got to have the games played. And so I don't think it should ever be an excuse. And I'm not saying that districts are calling this an excuse. I'm simply saying we should never arrive to a point where we live in a state that we know it's going to rain and rain a lot, and we have grass fields that turn into mud. We know that that's potentially coming. We should never, ever get to a spot where we say we don't have anywhere to go to play a game. So that's the first reason why that's the main reason, and then you can stem off a few other things from that. But you should never be able to say, well, our field is unplayable. Well, no, you can go on Monday and we can reschedule it. Call it whatever you want to call it, Veterans Memorial Stadium. And so that's one reason. Two, listen, even stadiums, even schools that have their own stadiums play at other community stadiums, and the larger the stadium, it doesn't matter whether or not you lose in the home or the away game or lose in the home game. The more people you get, the more money they spend. That goes a long way to offsetting the cost.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a little, economics folks will try and make it way more complicated than what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can fit 12,000 people into a stadium versus 4,000 people, it doesn't matter whether you had the home game or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, and that's even splitting it 50-50. So, and those are just crazy numbers, I know. But the point I'm trying to make is that there needs to be somewhere where the teams go, oh man, we're at the Coliseum this week.
Right, we're jacked up. We're jacked up.
Right, and you could have that stadium. You could have a premier game on Thursday night. You have a premier game on Friday night, and God forbid, you could have a game on Saturday afternoon and Saturday night. What's the problem? Listen, Texas does it, Illinois does it, Ohio does it, Pennsylvania does it, California does it. These teams are scheduled to play on Saturdays.
Miami does it.
Correct. Scheduled to play on Wednesdays in Miami. So, we need to get to a point where we're not having teams forced to play. We're spread way too thin in the sense of what kind of resources we're allocating to take care of these fields anyways. And that's not district's fault. That comes from up above in terms of it's not manna from heaven. That doesn't grow on trees. That comes from Tallahassee. So you get some things that you wouldn't ordinarily. You get some extremely beneficial things that happen from having a place where everybody can kind of gravitate towards, especially if with a county being so large geographically. Try driving from West Chase down to East Bay. Like go from Alonzo to East Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Or go from Newsom to Steinbrenner.
Mm-hmm.
You're still in the same county when you feel like you've been in the car for hours, even with traffic. You can get people to more centrally located things. Perhaps bus drivers don't have to get lost, so on and so forth. I think we've gotten so far into being stale that when you combine the staleness with pride, it's a dangerous thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody wants to host their thing. They're already, scrapping for money because of the centrally funded setup. Booster programs aren't really being allowed to boost the way they should. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of layers to it. It's a 7-layer bean dip of issues.
Mm-hmm.
But a centrally built stadium is something that, in the long run, I think that could benefit the greater area, the greater region. And what you mentioned about hosting state championship games, listen, I don't need that big cavernous stadium and all that in Orlando. I really don't. You build me something that's, specific for 15,000 people where you can host. Make it doesn't have to be small potatoes at 10,000. 10,000, Spec Martin can get 10,000 people with standing room. So, you can do something really super nice. And it doesn't have to be the Taj Mahal either. And you can put it in the proper spot in the county. And you can watch the teams flock to get their games on that schedule.
That's how I foresee it. If we're tossing ideas and being creative here, but that's kind of how I see it. Is if I were a high school player and I knew coming into our season that we were selected, my team was selected by the county, whatever committee, whatever the case may be, that we were going to play in such and such stadium on this date versus this team, it would be circled on the calendar. I'd be all jacked up. It would be advertised throughout because that was one of the premier events, and we were one of the premier teams, at least for that season. So I think it could create a lot of energy. And I hadn't thought about the aspect of the angle that you took as far as the safety concerns, but I'm with you, man. At this point in time, there should never be, hey, we can't play on our field, and you know what? We can't play on our opponent's field either because they got hit just as hard. So now we have to do this with the field, and that's kind of what happened with Armwood and Plant this year, right? Excuse me, no, check. Tampa Bay Tech and Armwood.
Right. Well, it's one thing that if power poles are down and press.
Well, we're talking about surface conditions.
We're talking about surface area.
Right.
Like if you knew that you had a place like if you, as it is, we should have Skyway and Progress Village should be hosting rain out games anyways. If as last resorts, you can if you got to get these games played, man. Like and depending on a waiver, depending on the FHSAA to approve a waiver, is not unlike depending on the NCAA to rule with their kangaroo court in some regards. You don't know what they're going to approve and what they're not. So you shouldn't, and there is an issue that could hold it up, and that is a lot of people don't want to pay more taxes. And you're running into an issue now because of how strapped. Here's facts that Hillsborough County Schools is strapped, and how are they going to pay for it without some sort of penny or half-cent tax?
Yep.
And so, but the problem is been robbing public schools forever anyways. And so, it's kind of like, well, can we take back the money that you've been giving away anyways? But that's that we could talk about that for days on end. We're talking about from a competition standpoint, and where we can at least go into a season knowing that our teams are going to play their full allotment of games because we have the facilities in place to allow them to play their full allotment.
Well, Doug, this is going to end our last segment. I appreciate you calling in and dropping all the great information. You got the last 15 seconds. You got the floor for the last 15 seconds, man. We'll close it out.
Clay Zephyrhills basketball score. That's going to be fun. And when you think of Clay, they're the high school version of Auburn. You think Auburn is a spread-out team, throw it all over the place? Nah, they've had 10 1,000-yard rushers, and half of those dudes were almost 2,000-yard rushers. They're going to have so many window dressings out there, it's not even funny, but they're going to run right between the tackles. So, your Zephyrhills, you got to get ready for that.
And we dropped the mic.